Joanne Curtis, who at hers and her husband's own expense have come all the way down from somewhere called Seaham-on-Sea, which is right up in County Durham, right up in the frozen northern wastelands. And starting tomorrow, okay, yes, I know I make northern jokes. That's why God gave us north-south divide, to people like me to make jokes about it. But at their own expense, David and Joanne, who are lovely, lovely people, have come down and doing a whole programme of events for kids tomorrow. Now, the stage lights are in my eyes, so I have no idea how many children there are in the audience, but I'm sure there are children, there are parents of children. And I'm just going to hand you over to Joanne for a minute or two to just explain what's happening tomorrow.
Thank you. What it is, we've called ourselves Crafty Monsters, and if you've been into the far room, all you'll see is a lot of balloons on the wall which don't really look like anything. But what we thought was, we try and make some paper mache monsters, and the young people, or the older people, if you're so inclined to Walter, could come along and you can use lots of PVA glue and newspaper, and once that's dry, which might take some time, so we'll do that fairly early on tomorrow. We're going to make some monsters with loads of newspaper and stuff. Once it's dry, we're going to paint it, make it look really, really scary, so there'll be a lot of monsters about. In the meantime, while it's drying, we thought we'd draw some monsters as well, so we've got a lot of sketch pads. And also, if you think you might have a crazy story in your head, we thought, why not write it down? So I'm going to be assisted by my lovely husband David and my beautiful daughter Rosie. Rosie's going to help with stories because she's got such a fantastic imagination, and hopefully himself and Dave are going to help the children make some pretty scary monsters. So if your kids are a little bit stuck, they don't want to go along to some of the talks, they want to come along and have a little bit draw, a little bit write, then that's fine, that's what they're going to do for the next 2 afternoons. Okay, thank you.
I didn't know about the stories. I've just had a bright idea, which I suppose according to the CFZ Constitution I should really run past Richard and Graham and probably my wife, because I can't ever do anything without my wife. But when we collect together the stories the kids have written, CFZ Press will publish it. So we'll do a book on them. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we've now got something really rather interesting. And I'm going to hand you over to Richard in his own inimitable style to introduce our next guest.
A couple of announcements before we go on. The bar tonight is open until 12. Right! And I've been told to reiterate that there is no food or water to be brought into, or beer for that matter, or pop, or any kind of liquid to be brought into the lecture hall on pain of taking out the back and getting a good kicking. Right, our next guest is the renowned artist Pollyanna Pickering, and she's not just any old artist, she's a very specialised artist. She only ever paints pictures of confectionery that you can't get anymore. She's here tonight to tell us how to paint Texan bars, spangles and Aztec bars. Come in.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Can I explain first of all, I am a wildlife artist and a naturalist, and not, as I was introduced in a recent talk I gave, Derbyshire's leading naturist. So this evening I'd like to tell you about a rather interesting sighting we had as we made one of our working trips through the tiny Himalayan kingdom of Bhutan. I was very honoured to be given a fellowship in support of this journey from the Worldwide Nature Artists Group, an international society based in Canada. This was a particular honour for me, as I was the first woman ever to be given a fellowship, and also the first artist outside Canada and America. So first of all, a little bit of background to our journey. Along with my daughter and business partner, Anna Louise, we flew out to Bhutan, a tiny little Himalayan kingdom. Together we trekked into the high mountains, the high Himalayas, where we camped in tiny tents. We also travelled down to the foothills of the Himalayas, to the borders of India, and we journeyed from the west of Bhutan the whole way across the kingdom to the far east. There is only one road joining the west of Bhutan to the east, the National Highway. The M1 it is not. It is a single track road with two-way traffic. Now just imagine meeting a lorry coming the other way. It's the hairiest road I've ever driven on. Fortunately, just look, it's just a nightmare. Fortunately, most of the traffic we met on the National Highway was simply herds of sheep and cows. Everywhere you're driving in the Kingdom of Bhutan, you seem to be going upwards. There only appear to be 3 road signs in Bhutan. Steep uphill, steep downhill, and hairpin bend. Somewhat unnecessary, as when you're driving in Bhutan, you will be experiencing one of these 3 at all times. Much of the time, much of the year, the National Highway is actually impassable. There is never a guarantee that you will be able to drive from the west to the east of Bhutan. During the winter months, the National Highway is completely blocked by the snows, heavy snows over the winter months. In the monsoon season, stretches of the road are washed down the mountainside. There is never a guarantee you're going to be able to travel on this road. One of my main target species on this journey was the red panda, and we were incredibly lucky early one morning to come across a red panda high in the trees. Anna Louise was able to photograph it, I sketched it. This was a painting I did on my return to my studio. This painting goes on exhibition in New York next month, part of a wildlife art exhibition, so we're flying out to see that. I'm rushing through this, but the last part of our journey took us into the far east of Bhutan. The Lonely Planet guide described this particular stretch of the road as the worst road in Bhutan and possibly in the world. We soon found out why. Going round this hairpin bend, we discovered a major crack in the road. Half the road was literally on the verge of going thousands of feet down the mountainside. I crouched gibbering in the footwell of the vehicle. Anna Louise was clinging to the back of the seat, sort of smiling glassily and humming a bide with me. Somehow, we cautiously edged along that narrow strip, and we managed to continue on our journey east. We trekked up into the high Himalayas to a tiny, remote little monastery. As we were climbing up the mountain, these eyes painted on the rock, rather sort of scary eyes, seemed to be looking at us and following our progress. When we arrived, we discovered that the monastery was called the Demon Subjugated Monastery. We had to get permission from the Special Commission to enter this tiny monastery. It's very remote. They hardly ever see any visitors anyhow. We did hire we had a team of 4 Bhutanese men, one of which acted as interpreter for us. And through him, we looked around. The outside was covered in flaking paintings of strange gods and demons. And inside, we got chatting to the caretaker monk, a lone monk in charge of this monastery. He'd been up there for 27 years, delighted to see visitors, kindly invited us into his little cell for a cup of yak butter tea, which, may I say, is a very acquired taste. And through our interpreter, once he discovered that we actually came from England, his face lit up. He spoke his only word of English, Beckham. How famous is that guy? This monk, as I say, has been 27 years in a tiny monastery high up in the Himalayas, yet he'd heard of David Beckham. So now we were kindred spirits. Clearly coming from England, we were David Beckham's best friends. So he agreed to take us into a tiny temple that he never took visitors into, and there he showed us a holy relic, a yeti scalp. Now sadly, it is forbidden to photograph the interior of any temple in Bhutan. which is absolutely so frustrating, as I'm sure you can imagine. He did, however, give me permission to make a sketch. And the reason I told you I'd find a Yeti on the side, when I told the Canadian Society that there was actually a Yeti reserve in Bhutan, which, by the way, is the only Yeti reserve in the world, they were joking with me that I'd come back with a sketch pad full of Yetis. But that surprised them. It's interesting, when we first found out that there was a Yeti reserve in Bhutan, it sounded like some kind of joke. But there are so many reports of sightings by the local people that just in case something does exist in this region, the government decided to set aside a reserve to protect the area. It does, of course, protect the region for the animals we do know live there, including snow leopards, tigers, a lot of wildlife. So we got chatting to some of the local tribespeople, the nomadic tribespeople out there. My main focus, of course, was wildlife, and I was asking about snow leopards. They told us that, yes, very occasionally they will see a snow leopard there. They then told us that also very occasionally they see Yetis. Following the description of these local tribespeople, I did this sort of identikit picture. The Yeti scalp, by the way, I have to say was very strange. It was certainly not like anything I've ever seen before. I couldn't say, oh no, obviously it's not, obviously it's a bit of bear skin or whatever. It was different. It had a very distinct tuft on the top, and the hair was actually quite long, and it went into almost sort of into dreadlocks, so it was quite long. Following the description, I did this photo fit picture of a Yeti. Then one of the locals sort of laughed and said that, you know, the reason you don't see Yetis very often, according to their mythology, Yetis can become invisible at will, which is a neat trick if you can manage it. So here we are, this is Anna Louise's photo of a Yeti. Well, we certainly know that snow leopards do roam these high Himalayas. We weren't lucky enough to find one on this occasion, but we did find footprints in the snow high in the mountains. You know, looking out over these vast high Himalayas, these almost inaccessible areas, it's easy to believe that anything can be living out there. On my return to my studio, I did many paintings of the wildlife. I was also very inspired by the temples, the gold leaf work in the temples, and these are symbols from inside the temples on this one. We weren't lucky enough to find snow leopards on this particular occasion, but I don't give up easily. We're planning to go into Pakistan, into Mongolia, and indeed to return to Bhutan. And next time I shall certainly be asking an awful lot more questions about these Yetis. As I say, it wasn't my main focus. And I now regret, I didn't realise how much interest there was in them, I regret not asking an awful lot more about them. So, just very basically, that's the story of our journey, very quickly. And I'd now like to open the evening to questions. I'd like to ask Anna Louise to join me. We both made this journey together, so if anyone has any questions, we would be very happy to answer.
Now, there's actually a story behind these two lovely ladies being with us tonight. I may be an overweight, aging hippie, but I'm still a knight in shining armour. And these two ladies were subjected to the most appalling level of internet viciousness. Some American researchers, who shall remain nameless, when the story broke, "Oh gee, who are these two limey broads who think they can see a Yeti? Why can't we ever talk to them? I bet they're just two hippie chicks John Downs knows." Well, I've never actually met either of these two ladies this evening. I rode into battle on my rusty steed, rusty armoured, probably rusty steed as well. If anyone's ever seen my Jaguar will know it's very rusty. I rode into battle and I said, A, I've never met these ladies. B, Miss Pickering is a lady who has a peerless reputation as a wildlife artist and does an awful lot of good conservation work. C, you people who are making these outrageous claims are just a bunch of armchair idiots who spend your days in front of a computer screen typing illiterate drivel onto the internet. Well, why can't we actually talk to them? I said, I think we probably can. So I sent off an email, a speculative email to Anne Louise and said, Ian, any chance of getting Pollyanna to come up? Much to my amazement, she said yes, and I thought, right. So I posted to all the Bigfoot news groups, and I said, guys, will you like to send in questions about their encounter with the skull? So I can then put them, we'll film it, it'll go out on CFZtv, so all you people can ask these ladies questions. And do you know how many of the estimated 498 people on the Bigfoot Yeti news group sent questions? None of them. So, I'm going to throw it open to you lot. Now, Aurelia, will you do me a favour, love? Because usually, as anyone knows, I have David's younger brother is my microphone runner-abouter with person. But he is following in his old uncle's footsteps. He's off feeding 3 orphaned baby hedgehogs, which is, I think you'll agree, a really good thing for a young man of 9 or 10 or... And his godson, is he 9 or 10?
He's 13.
No, little one, Greg.
Oh, Greg's 9.
9, I'm his godfather, I can't remember these things. So instead I have the lovely radio running, so now questions, and you lot had better be better than the Bigfoot group and ask some. Gentlemen at the back.
Hiya. I was just wondering, did it have a smell?
No scent at all. It wasn't, I'm just sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, we understood, and bear in mind this is all through our interpreter, but that it was quite old. Probably it had been in the temple for, they indicated a couple of generations, so probably at least 50, 60 years old. So if it ever did have a smell, it certainly didn't by the time we got there. And it was also sort of fairly high above us. It was mounted on a pole. It was about, the pole I was told was about 8 feet in length, so it was quite high. Which again we understood kind of represented the height that it would have been in life. It would have been around that height. So.
Gentleman in the back row.
Hello. Would you say that their belief in the snow leopard was as strong as the belief in the Yeti? Was it?
To them, yes, there were just 2 different animals that they find in this region.
So it's definitely real.
Absolutely.
In their mind.
Cynical people have said, oh, obviously they're just seeing bears standing on their hind legs. But these people see bears regularly. They know exactly what a bear looks like. They know what a bear looks like when it's standing on its hind legs. They also know what a Yeti looks like. It's another animal to them. And they weren't trying to convince us that they exist. To them, they exist. It's just something they see occasionally.
Thank you.
And I would also say the fact that sort of within their mythology they have things like the Yetis become invisible doesn't necessarily mean that either that's something they believe as a zoological fact or would indicate that the Yeti itself is mythical. I mean, for example, the most famous temple in Bhutan, the one that you see all the photographs of, is the Tiger's Nest, the monastery perched high on the cliff near the Paro, where the airport is. And that temple was built on the spot that, according to legend, a monk flew into on the back of a tiger. Now, we know tigers don't fly, but we also know that they're real, so a lot of animals do get sort of mythologized. Yes. I invent a word that fits what I need to say there. So yes, the fact that Yetis are within their mythology doesn't necessarily mean that they're a mythical animal.
And you know, it's just over 100 years ago that we thought giant pandas were mythological. So their territory, to my mind, is far easier to explore than the territory that the Yetis live in.
Being a wildlife artist, by the way, I think that was an excellent presentation. It was very, very absorbing. Being a wildlife artist, I would imagine you have an incredible eye for detail. When you were looking at the scalp,
yeah.
What did your instinct tell you were looking at?
As I say, I've just certainly never seen anything remotely like it before. The hair was just so different. It wasn't like bare skin, bare fur, and it definitely went into dreadlocks. It was quite long, which I wouldn't have expected. I mean, it was, I don't know how else to describe it. Can you do a better job?
Not really. I mean, to be honest, it looked, from our perspective, exactly like what they said it was. Now, years ago and no one had ever moved, and it kind of became that to them. But they were very sincere about that was what this is, and we had no reason to doubt them, really.
Were you given any indication as to how and why the scalp was collected? Does this mean the Yeti was hunted at some stage?
No, unfortunately. As I say, my main focus was the wildlife, and I'm now looking back, wished I'd asked so many more questions. They told us this, their word for Yeti is migai. They told us this was the scalp of the migai, and we just said, wow,
Yeah.
And oh gosh, how I regret. But we are hoping to go back into Bhutan. We've raised a lot of money to assist the conservation there, so maybe we'll get the opportunity to return and ask those unasked questions.
Was it general at the monastery that there were animal remains? I mean, that there were skins of other animals?
No,
pelts?
No, nothing else. No.
Because that strikes me as intriguing, that you would have the scalp of one particular animal and not remains of other animals from the area.
No other remains at all.
Yeah.
A lot of Buddhist statues and this sort of thing, but no other animal remains, no.
Just to say, for those of you who don't know, I don't think you two know either, Gail, Dr. Gail Nina Anderson, is one of our speakers on Sunday. She's an art historian, which is interesting. I thought I'd introduce this in because it's sort of, maybe she can help sort of contextualize. Is that the right word?
Absolutely.
If I can make up words as well. Oh hell, whatever. Put it into context.
Thank you.
We'll say one occasion where hair was actually subjected to molecular analysis. It's claimed to have come from a Yeti. It actually turned out to be from a yak. And just looking at the drawing you made, it does look a bit like yak hair. So I'm interested to know, what might your opinion be on that?
Well, interesting, it's a possibility. I mean, certainly I'm in no position to say exactly what it was. And we saw many yak while we were out there, and yes, they do indeed have long, silky, black hair, and so sure, that is a possibility. But I have an open mind about this. I mean, it's only within the last 12 months that new species were discovered in the rainforests, and it wasn't some minute little insect, it was quite a sizable animal. There are still things out there that we haven't found. And the BBC spent 3 years trying to film a snow leopard in the wild. I just wish somebody would spend that long in the right region trying to capture a possible Yeti. Or footage, whatever. Yes, not Yeti. Yeah.
Did you actually speak to any witnesses?
The local nomadic tribes people, yes.
And what were their descriptions?
They were absolutely sort of classic Yeti descriptions, sort of roughly 8 feet tall, varying in colour from reddish brown through to black. Really everything that we would normally think of the descriptions from that region, it fitted in with those kinds of sightings. And they have plenty of stories of them coming to the villages and kidnapping women and so forth.
Well, they used to say that about gorillas at one time. Any descriptions of tool use at all?
Descriptions of?
Tool use.
No, not that we were told, no.
Yeah, I assume from the photograph of the gateway of the monastery and the restriction getting into it, that this is actually quite a remote monastery. It's not sort of on your normal tourist drag, presumably, for everybody to go in and pay the 20p or whatever and look at the Yeti scalp.
Yes, it was. We were basically, at that point, we were camping in the national parks, obviously looking for the wildlife, and we were trekking between campsites. And of course, there are many monasteries and temples in Bhutan, and any time we had one within trekking distance, we would go up to have a look round, really just out of interest, obviously. They do accept visitors. They don't get many foreign visitors get out to that part of the country at all, largely because, as Pollyanna was saying, it's very inaccessible anyway. And it was only because of this amazing bond that we forged with the monk through the medium of David Beckham that he took us into that area at all. So it was purely by chance that we were shown into that particular area of the temple.
So if you ever get David Beckham up there, you might get a chance to handle it.
Exactly, he could probably bring it home.
You saw the state of the roads. I mean, there's no way they can take tourist coaches. They can't promise people to go to the Far East of Bhutan, and very few tourists actually get into that region. And it's certainly only possible over the spring, summer months.
Did they seem more scared of the Yeti than of the other things like bears and leopards? The locals?
No, I didn't get that impression. It was just something they occasionally saw. Oh gosh, I just so wish I'd asked more questions. No, they didn't speak of them with fear, no.
Can I come with you when you go back?
Yeah, why not? I'll take you away. Sure. It was quite tough, and we did both get altitude sickness. It wasn't quite as easy as it maybe looked.
Question up here.
Poor Dan Holdsworth's been waving his arms around for ages. So.
Was there anything else there apart from hair? I mean, I've heard rumours that there was a skull fragment or something like that there. Was there anything else?
And the whole thing, I mean, actually, we just mentioned this as a slight aside to a local newspaper when we were telling them about the exhibition of the wildlife. And it turned into a media circus, I'm afraid. And there were some grossly inaccurate reports in many newspapers that we found bone and blood and flesh. So this is ridiculous. We weren't allowed to touch this scalp, this Yeti scalp. We weren't allowed to examine it, obviously, and we weren't allowed to photograph it. So I'm afraid a lot of the reports were grossly exaggerated.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Dave Curtis up the back.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Dave, wait for the microphone. Yes, it won't get picked up on the camera.
Was it revered? Did the monk revere it? Did he think there was anything special about it?
Well, they did refer to it as a relic, which would imply that it did have a sort of special significance. I would imagine that more than anything that would be because of its incredible rarity, because even if they accept it's an animal, it's clearly not one that you're going to see every day. So I think it was probably not revered in the sense of having anything holy about it, but certainly treated with interest and as something very special, hence the fact it was kept in the temple.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Any more? Dan, are you scratching your nose or asking another question? Well,
John.
Richard, you have to wait until the last minute.
Well, I have been sticking my hand up from time to time. Were there any stories of any more complicated interactions than ladies being carried off by the Yeti? People interacting over longer periods? People are actually, people you just spoke to actually interacting with them?
No, really just women and children being kidnapped occasionally or taken from the villages, carried away by Yeti.
No, I would say that those stories were probably more something that happened to a friend of a friend, whereas we did speak to people who said, yes, we've seen them in the distance, we've seen them on the mountains, but stories of interaction seem to have more of that sort of what we would think of as urban myth quality. They weren't sort of first-hand, they were more, it happened to my sister's, best friend or my great aunt or something like that. So, no, certainly we weren't told any more stories of more complex or lengthy interaction there. It was primarily distant sightings.
I do wish I could tell you all more about them. It would be just so wonderful if proof came to light that they do exist. I do hope that would happen one day.
I would say actually we came back probably with, well certainly with an open mind, but believing more in the possibility they could be out there than before we went to Bhutan. And it wasn't really because of seeing the Yeti scalp or even talking to the people, it was just purely seeing the habitat. It was seeing the mountain ranges and seeing how remote they were and appreciating how uninhabited and unexplored they are as well. And there is so much space out there for almost anything to be living there, really. So it's
26% of the country is within protected reserves. There are no hotels within them, there are barely any roads. They are very highly protected. This country is about the size of Switzerland and the population is about the same as the size of Birmingham. So it's only very lightly populated. There is just a mass of mountains, and looking out over those peaks, you just don't even know how you could get to them, how you could carry enough food and equipment to reach them. It's a vast, unexplored area. There certainly could be a lot of things we don't know about in Bhutan, and I hope so.
Now, you've got to forgive me for sort of butting in at the last moment after I've already told Richard off for doing that. Hey, it's my party and I can do what I want, boys. I don't know very much about Himalayan theology. Theology is probably not the right word. But is there a central religious authority, a Bhutanese version of the Archbishop of Canterbury?
There is indeed, and Anna Louise was actually blessed by him, the second most important person to the king, the head of religion of Bhutan. The main religion is, of course, Buddhism, and the head of religion occasionally goes out into the villages to bless people. And apparently he was in one of the villages we were passing through, and we were about to go up and have a look at this guy, and he'd already got into his car and he was driving away. And he was driving past Anna Louise very slowly. The car stopped, the window went down, and this stick with a tassel came out of the window, tapped her on the head, and apparently that was the blessing. So she had been blessed by the head of religion of Bhutan.
Well, as you're obviously very blessed ladies, and I was wondering if on your next expedition there you put Yeti hunting higher up on the agenda, because now it's caught your imagination, you now know about it. I know you say that in all the churches, in all the temples that one is not allowed to photograph, one's not allowed to do all sorts of things in churches, but if you write to the Archbishop of Canterbury's office first, you can exhume saints' relics, you can do all sorts of things. If you went through the proper channels, what do you think the chances would be of being able to have access that a normal tourist would not have?
It's always worth a try. Why not? Maybe next time we'll contact the head of religion and see what we can achieve.
Well, I'm sure I speak on behalf of everybody here, but certainly as director of the CFZ, if there's anything we can do to help, because, if you do manage to persuade the head of religion to let you photograph it, touch it, bring back a few micro bits of hair, and we can get them DNA tested, we can do this. And even if it does turn out to be a yak, what a heck of a story it is. Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you're going to agree with me, that was absolutely fascinating. It's fantastic to speak to people who actually go out and do it, who actually go to places where nobody else goes. And that's one of the reasons I really enjoyed doing the Weird Weekend. It's a great privilege to have people like this here. Ladies and gentlemen, Anna Louise and Pollyanna Pickering. Thank you very much. Okay, guys. We are running a little bit late, but we're not running as late as we were. We have now got a half-hour break, which is your last chance to get food, and then we are coming back for 2 talks without a break. Now, I should warn you that when Mike, wave to the boys and girls so we can see who you are, when Mike Hallowell told me about what's going to be the subject of his next talk, it scared the living daylights out of me. I would suggest anybody here who is a parent of a child in the audience might want to have a word with Mike first to see if they deem it appropriate for their kids. I do not make, CFZ isn't an alley state, I don't make that decision for anybody. But just like last year when we had an interesting talk by Dr. Charles Paxton about how certain sea monsters might actually be excited male whales swimming on their backs. Excuse me, do we have to have this tittering from the cheap seats? But last year I threw it open to, in fact I always did, I phoned the lady who's pretty well my sister, Kay, and I said, Kay, do you think the ladies of the village are going to object if their children see that? She said, no. But anybody here who's got kids, I would suggest just have a quick word with Mike, because I think his story of the times like poltergeist might be a bit scary for some tender minds. Okay, back in half an hour with my good friend Richard Ingram, doing a last minute talk which I only commissioned this morning about 100 years since something which may have been a UFO, or it may have been something even stranger, crashed in the Siberian forest. Music, maestro.